Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to our stream today. Thank you so much for coming aboard. We have so much exciting stuff to cover. We have a brand new Venom and Carnage crossover that I just could not be more excited to talk about over on this stream today. Elsewhere, I think we had a fantastic week on the channel. I want to thank everybody for just the tremendous support over for our video review for Dead X-Men #1. I thought that series, written by Steve Folks, featuring art from Bernard Chang, Vincenzo Corratu, and let's see, who was our third artist? It was Jonas Scharf. I thought that series was just absolutely tremendous. I thought it had so much ambition and once again, just really organized and utilized a lot of those Krakoa elements in some really surprising ways. And another thing that has me just really, really excited about the Marvel Universe in general right now is how much everybody is referencing the element known as Mysterium. Mysterium right now is the element that Iron Man is actually building his new armor out of. So I just feel like there is so much interesting plot developments happening from this like one piece of elemental over in the Marvel universe that's just so exciting. Elsewhere, we also featured a DC Comics review. We had the opportunity to check back in with Batman and Robin, one of my favorite ongoing series at DC Comics. However, this issue was actually an annual as opposed to just a regular ongoing issue of the series. I think it was a ton of fun to watch Bruce and Damian, develop their relationship as a crime-fighting duo over the course of a camping trip. I thought that was so much fun. Today on our stream, I also think we're going to have a ton of fun too, because we're going to preview our next upcoming DC book, which is going to be Birds of Prey issue 6. Before we head into all the news this week, there's actually like a sizable portion of news stemming from everything from X-Men to just the entire brand new Ultimate line. I think one of my most like exciting pieces of Marvel Comics right now outside of the X-Men is definitely everything in store for the Ultimate line. And this week, we're going to talk about Ultimate X-Men, but we're also going to explore some interior pages over for Ultimate Black Panther. I feel like the creative team on that book is so good. I had a chance to check out some of the preview pages before we got on stream today, and they are amazing. I am just so excited to go ahead and jump into everything we have in store. I hope you had enough time to check out those video reviews. I hope just the rapid pace of all the X-Men books just constantly launching, isn't kind of like throwing you off your game here. But without further ado, I want to officially welcome you over to our stream today. My name is Arakko, and we have so much to go ahead and discuss and get into. Why don't we just go ahead and dive right into our very first news story for the day. This one is actually a preview that we discussed just a few moments ago. This is the upcoming preview for the next issue for DC Comics Birds of Prey series. I have been such a big fan of this series with each and every issue. The vast majority of this series so far has been illustrated by just the wonderful Leonardo Romero. I think the team over in this Birds of Prey series is super interesting, as we have some mainstays from the Birds of Prey with characters like Harley Quinn, but we also have just like some off the beaten path characters like Big Barda. We have Meridian from Gotham Academy, Zealot from Wildstorm, as well as Cassandra Cain, Orphan, or as she's known currently in the DC universe, Batgirl. And also, basically the mission statement that united our Birds of Prey together was the fact that they were trying to find Dinah's adopted daughter known as Sin, who was kidnapped over on Themyscira. So our birds were able to go to Themyscira and try and rescue Sin, but unfortunately it looks like Sin has been possessed by this character known as Megara. So in addition to Birds of Prey having a really interesting plot, I have just absolutely loved the line work from Romero. I think in particular Romero was just fantastic at drawing the facial expressions for the various characters, whether it be like Harley Quinn, Zealot, or Dinah. To be fair, some of these facial expressions are a little bit similar to each other, but I think there's something to be said about the way that Leonardo Romero is able to make his characters emote. Also, as you can see from this color as well, Jordi Belair just really introduces an amazing color palette to Birds of Prey. This cover is so cool as we kind of see our characters, assembling towards this really interesting light towards the bottom of the page here. Want to give a quick shout out to Adventures in Poor Taste and read the solicit text over on Birds of Prey issue 6. All Out War on Themyscira. Its All Out War on Themyscira as the team faces against the mystical Megara. Can the birds overcome this ancient evil, or will one of them have to pay the ultimate price? So I think we got every member of the Birds of Prey 6 creative team, maybe aside from letterist Clayton Cowles. Let's go ahead and explore some of the interior pages for the issue as well. One thing about Megadeth, the introduction storyline for Birds of Prey, is that this has been going for a really, really long time now. I do think I'm a little bit exhausted in terms of this story, and I am really hoping that DC will go ahead and wrap up, the Birds of Prey rescuing Sin over within the context of this issue. But I think, as you can see from the interior page that we have on the screen, there is just so many interesting techniques, so many like vivid facial expressions illustrated from Romero for the character of Sin. I really love this extreme close-up on her eyes, teasing the influence that the character of Megara has on her. Grayson Red says, Belair is the secret weapon in this amazing book. I absolutely agree. But I think there's a lot to be said, of course, for Thompson and Romero's contributions here. There's a really great sense of perspective on this page, too. I think it's really interesting how Leonardo Romero kind of zooms out, which is really nicely juxtaposed from this like extreme close-up over on Sin's eyes. Also, the way that this sword is like being introduced towards Sin's neck is just a great way to introduce the tension on the page. It really feels like Leonardo Romero is really thinking about where he's positioning the actual like panel or the page on the screen here. Over on this next page, we've gotten so many just wonderful moments of like edgelord, violence from Zealot. I'm really happy to see Kelly Thompson introduce yet another one here, as Zealot seems to think that Sin is influenced by Megara, which also appears to bear fruit over in the third panel, as we have the possessed Sin, stating, "You wouldn't hurt this innocent child." As mentioned earlier, there's just so many great moments with the incredibly violent, intense Zealot. Really watching her kind of test the limits of the team and actually try and maybe off Sin in order to stop Megara, I think is a really fantastic plot point. This next page is nothing short of wonderful here, as we have this beautiful panel bleed from Big Barda introducing an imposing element towards the page here as well. Harley Quinn has had a really interesting, cameo in terms of Birds of Prey as a member on the team. The way that she kind of checks Dinah and the rest of the Birds of Prey members has been really interesting. And I also think that kind of throughout this run of Birds of Prey, we've seen Dinah and Harley become closer and closer with each other as heroes. So we have a bitter and violent end potentially over for Sin, as Zealot stabbed her because she's currently possessed by Megara. Once again, it's so interesting seeing the way that Romero was able to illustrate the various tendrils of Megara that was such a highlight over the last issue. And I'm also just loving some of these kind of like blue hues and silhouettes, really punctuating, I think, kind of the sad vibe of the issue stemming from the loss of Sin over within the narrative here. So there's really interesting stuff in Birds of Prey issue 6. I'm also really interested to see if our Birds of Prey will be able to exorcise Megara from Sin and just how this storyline is going to wrap up. I am really hoping, just at large from DC Comics, that the Megadeth storyline is coming to an end soon, and that this Birds of Prey book will be more than just a sister title to the Wonder Woman comic and really establish its own sense of identity. However, I would say so far that the Birds of Prey series is off to a pretty good start. I think the team dynamic, the writing between the characters is super interesting, and the book as a whole has a great sense of ambition. I'm really curious about where Birds of Prey is going, and we will have a full review of issue 6 this upcoming Tuesday. All right, give me just 1 second, and we're going to shoot into our next news story. This is one of my very favorite news stories over for the stream. I am so excited to get into it with you. So I think at this stage, we've been streaming over a year. And one of the news stories that I did not interpret, I would say correctly at the time, was this Summer of Symbiote storyline introduced March of 2023. So I have been so impressed with what Al Ewing, Kafu, and other creators have brought to Marvel's current Venom series. I feel like it's taken the character of Eddie Brock and plunged him directly into the sci-fi nature of Marvel Comics. I also think that putting a heavier emphasis on Eddie Brock's son Dylan and giving him a symbiote has just created so much just interesting story dynamics and plot elements. And I was really hoping that this Summer of Symbiote story was going to be an expansion of science fiction, towards Marvel's symbiote line of comics. Sadly, I think what this really turned out to be was just a bunch of kind of disparate symbiote storylines. But it looks like Marvel is finally making good on this Summer of Symbiotes with an expansion of the science fiction elements of the Venom character by really introducing the brand new Carnage series with the crossover called Symbiosis Necrosis. So here's an issue of the first chapter of the series, which actually takes place over in Venom 31. I am just really mystified by what Toran Grandbeck has achieved over on Marvel's current Carnage series, really pitting the character of Cletus Cassidy against Flash Thompson as anti-Venom. There are so many interesting plot threads spinning amidst all of the disparate symbiote books, and I feel like all Marvel has to do at this point is put them together to tell a really, really fascinating story. Without further ado, let's go ahead and explore what Marvel has in store for this really, really epic, storyline called Symbiosis Necrosis. New Venom and Carnage crossover snares Eddie and Dylan Brock in Carnage's chaos. Witness a symbiote bloodbath for the ages in Symbiosis Necrosis, a new crossover story coming to Venom and Carnage this month. Previously announced on Marvel's original podcast series This Week in Marvel, Marvel's two ongoing symbiote titles will play host to a vicious family drama starting next month titled Symbiosis Necrosis. Written by current Venom and Carnage scribes Toran Grunbeck and Al Ewing and drawn by Ken Lashley and Pere Perez, this four-part crossover will take over both titles in March and April. Grunbeck stopped by This Week in Marvel to reveal the scope of the story, which kicks off when Carnage, fresh off his latest slaughter spree in Death of the Venomverse, targets Eddie Brock. And how better to get his mortal enemy than going after Eddie's son and fellow Venom, Dylan? As you can see here from this solicit, there is so many interesting plot threads spinning within the context of both books here. And I think one thing to really be excited about in terms of Symbiosis Necrosis is the fact that Toran Grunbeck is so heavily involved. Grunbeck has delivered so much epic work at Marvel across titles like Realm of X. We also had some really fantastic Venom issues also written by her as opposed to Al Ewing. Also, the artists on this series, Ken Lashley and Pere Perez, really strong and really fantastic horror artists. Pere Perez has really, really been, interesting me as a creator recently. Really seeing him draw some more violent books in the context of these symbiote stories are so, so interesting here. And I want to learn more about why. Let's see, who do we have here? Yeah, and I want to know a little bit more about why Carnage is targeting Eddie Brock and Dylan here. The father and son pair are currently on interwoven journeys across space and time in the pages of Venom, but their paths will collide dramatically when Dylan faces off against Cletus for the first time. The saga will be packed with explosive developments, including a new look for Carnage that fans can see in Kafu's Venom 32 cover, a power-up for Dylan, a shocking twist to Cletus in Carnage's bond, and an epic showdown with the only symbiote Carnage truly fears, anti-Venom. Yeah, I know we mentioned this earlier, but really pitting Carnage against Dylan, I think, is a great way to expand like the next generation of Marvel characters. Also, I thought over in the context of Marvel's core Carnage series, the character of Cletus Cassidy is just so violent, so fearful that pitting him against a younger character, I think, is really going to evoke a really fascinating horror scenario. Discussing the series with host Angelique Roach, Grunbeck said there is some family drama going on here, because technically they're both the child of Eddie or Venom in a sort of strange way, and it felt natural to bring them together. It brings up, especially for Dylan, all the secrets that Venom has kept from him. Venom was the one who made Eddie do horrible things. If Dylan sees the full extent of what Venom has done in this world, it might not be great. Yeah, and for me too, the idea that maybe Dylan and Carnage are kind of the twisted sons of Venom is a really interesting way to, characterize both of these characters and pit them together in just a slightly different context. And Carnage, being as sadist as he is, he doesn't want to just kill Dylan. He wants Dylan to be aware of everything Venom has done. And it turns into a sort of spectacular thing, and then it sort of takes a turn. I'm not going to say what kind of turn, but it doesn't go the way that you think it will. And here is just the wonderful cover over on Venom issue 31. I'm going to go ahead and read off the solicit right now. So it looks like this issue is written by Gronbeck. This one features art from Ken Lashley, fantastic artist, as well as just a beautiful cover from Kafu. I feel like Kafu has drawn so much of Al Ewing's Venom series that really seeing him introduce covers for titles that are related to the main Venom book feels right at home for me. Venom in the Blood kicks off in Venom 31, where born in new symbiote goo and blood, Cletus Cassidy is more dangerous and violent than ever before, and has his sights dead set on the unsuspecting Venom. Untested against the might of his symbiotic sibling, and without his father by his side, will Dylan Brock be able to hold the sadistic serial killer at bay? Or will Carnage live up to its namesake and leave another brutalized symbiote host in its wake? Man, so just to kick off this storyline, we are pitting Carnage directly against Dylan for Symbiosis, Necrosis. I am really glad that, Toron Grunbeck, Ken Lashley, and Kafu, that they are all just putting the pedal to the metal here and really pulling on some of the most interesting scenarios to kick off this crossover. I am so thrilled to pick up Venom 31. Also, another quick thing about Marvel's Venom series is that they have been exchanging arcs between Al Ewing and Toron Grunbeck, which also kind of switches the protagonists of the series as well. Grunbeck has really written the issues centered around Dylan, so watching her return to Dylan in the context of the main Venom series, I think feels just right at home. Metafox, I missed your comment, but thank you so much for coming to check out our stream today. All right, so this is Carnage issue 5. This one is also written by Grunbeck, featuring art from Pere Perez. Another interesting thing about this is it actually has a cover over from Juan Ferreira, who's much more of like a traditional horror artist as opposed to what Kafu brings here. Following the events of Venom 31, Carnage has Dylan in his grasp, his Carnage 5. But is Dylan just bait for Eddie, the King in Black himself? Time for some bloody brother bonding. Yeah, the idea that they're brothers is so twisted, so dark. Can't wait to see how it plays off over on the page. I think this solicit also kind of teases the fact that Dylan is not successful in his battle with Carnage over in Venom 31, but I really don't think that Dylan has the power set to really offset or do any sort of damage to Carnage. So I think that that is a really appropriate story beat that Toron Grunbeck is hitting. Why don't we explore the next issue of this? Check out the latest, it looks like this is the latest, costume over for the character of Carnage that this article was teasing. This one is actually written by Al Ewing, so we're switching from Grunbeck over to Al Ewing for part 3 of Symbiosis Necrosis in Venom 32. Ken Lashley is still on art. We still have Kafu over on the covers. In Venom 32, Venom in the Blood takes readers to the greatest depths of space and, at the end of existence, the flowering fauna of the symbiotic Garden of Time. But some carnivorous new species has blossomed there, something blood red with thorns and an appetite. Now that I think a little bit more about this cover, I kind of realize that Al Ewing has really taken some of his plot threads over with Eddie Brock and the Garden of Time and Meridius, and really appears to be kind of weaving them over in the main book that Toron Grunbeck is spinning here. I'm really interested to see how Eddie Brock is going to, pop up over in this crossover and how he'll respond to Carnage's vicious attack over on his son. And I'm also excited too to see what role that Flash Thompson has to play in this storyline. Over as the anti-Venom, who's currently hunting Carnage in the pages of that main ongoing series here. So this is issue 6 of Carnage, and the fourth part of Symbiosis Necrosis, written by Toran Grunbeck, featuring art once again by Pere Perez, and we have this nightmarish Juan Ferreira cover as well. Oh, interestingly enough, this is the only issue that we don't have a solicit for. I was just getting ready to check out what the solicit was for this one, but we have no more additional coverage. I am really hoping that before Symbiosis Necrosis winds down, that there's going to be some role for Flash Thompson. It looks like we also have a Kafu design for this brand new design over for Cletus Cassidy as Carnage. He looks a lot like Meridius, and I'm wondering if some of these elements are going to be related to the main Venom series or to the Garden of Time or to an alternate version of maybe Bedlam or a different Eddie Brock. I just love the science fiction, the timey-wimey nature of the main Venom series, and I can't wait to see what kind of plot threads Toran Grunbeck introduces to that book from the main Carnage series. And also, I'm really hoping one last time here that Flash Thompson plays a big role over in that storyline. I am just so happy that Marvel is finally leaning into those science fiction elements over in terms of their main, symbiote storylines here. Hope you enjoyed our coverage over for that upcoming symbiote crossover. Super excited to check out Symbiosis Necrosis. And once again, I'm also hoping that in some future Marvel comics, that Marvel will continue to push the science fiction aspects of Venom as opposed to just telling it like kind of like a retro, violent pastiche here, because I don't think it always leads to the greatest comic book series. Okay, so we just spent time analyzing, some of my favorite DC comics as well as some upcoming symbiote storylines. Why don't we switch gears a little bit and explore what's coming next over for Marvel Comics Ultimate Universe? We have a brand new preview of Marvel's Ultimate Black Panther Issue 1. The shocking identity of Black Panther's new Ultimate Universe wife. This was published 2 days ago on CBR.com by Brian Cronin. The new Ultimate Universe has its own take on King T'Challa, and you'll see who his wife is in the CBR exclusive preview of Ultimate Black Panther Issue 1. So I think for the most part, Marvel's brand new Ultimate series has been nothing short of a massive success. I am so interested to see if the line is able to support a more niche comic book like Black Panther. It's so new, I feel like it's been operating for just a couple months here after series like Ultimate Invasion. But I'm just so happy that so many of Marvel's disparate Ultimate comic books have also been devoted to setting up the status quo for what's going on in the Ultimate version of Africa with the character of Black Panther. As we've previously explored, there's been elements of both Khonshu and Ra, as well as the character of Moon Knight, who seems to have some ties over to the series. Without further ado here, let's go ahead and jump into some preview and just get a little bit of context over on Ultimate Black Panther. Marvel's new Ultimate Universe was completely reshaped by the maker in Ultimate Invasion, and in his absence, things got even crazier in Ultimate Universe 1. And now it's time for T'Challa and Wakanda to step into the reshaped political landscape of this new version of the Ultimate Universe in the CBR exclusive preview of next week's Ultimate Black Panther 1. We've been hyping up this book for such a long time. I can't believe this one is finally about to come out here. Of course, this series written over from Brian Edward Hill, featuring art from Stefano Caselli, colors from David Curiel. Ultimate Black Panther 1 follows the events of Ultimate Universe as the remaining members of the Maker's Council dramatically shifted the power dynamic of the world with the horrifying terrorist attack that they pinned on Tony Stark. Now Khonshu and Ra, who combined are known as Moon Knight, are turning their attention to taking over more of Africa, and that brings him into direct conflict over with Wakanda. So we have these elements over with Khonshu and Ra as they begin to try and take Wakanda from the king himself, T'Challa here. Let's go ahead and preview some of Stefano Caselli's wonderful art over in Black Panther issue 1 from Marvel Comics. So we can see this issue opens here in West Africa with some of the members being introduced by a mysterious glow or flash of light here. Also, really like how Stefano Caselli is able to pace some of the movement within the scope of the issue. We have a character getting ready to kind of hammer, down a piece of, it looks like we have just a piece of terrain over on a construction site. And then within the next couple panels, we have just this vivid flash of light here, giving way to the elements of aggressors who are trying to take control of this piece of Africa here. Over on the next page, we have some of the elements of Wakanda kind of lurking in the background, previewing, some of the mysterious invaders trying to take hold of their land. Once again, just some great reaction shots from Stefano Caselli. We have some beautiful hints of negative space over in the background of the issue as well. Also, just a really interesting introduction over for T'Challa in the span of Ultimate Black Panther 1. We can see him awaking, and we can see the character of Okoye seems to be with him as well within the span of the issue. I think it's so interesting that T'Challa has a different relationship with Okoye as opposed to the main series here. Also, within the context of Marvel's main Black Panther series, T'Challa has been exiled from Wakanda. So we definitely have a more kind of back to basics, traditional status quo for T'Challa within the span of Ultimate Black Panther 1. I also think that this final page, kind of introducing the scope of the series and really showing what Stefano Caselli is able to do on the page, is really bold and beautiful here. So I am very, very excited about Ultimate Black Panther 1. It looks like this is going to be a huge 40-page issue. We're going to have a full review over for the debut of the series. And I also want to go ahead and check out the first issue solicit just one more time here. In the wake of Ultimate Invasion, Khonshu and Ra, the force known together as Moon Knight, are seeking to expand their brutal control of the continent of Africa. In response, the lone bulwark against him, the isolated nation of Wakanda, will send forth its champion, its king, its Black Panther. From the creative minds of Brian Hill and Stefano Caselli comes a bold new take on the world of Black Panther and Wakanda. The freedom that Hill has to re-envision Black Panther and Wakanda with this new universe has clearly been appreciated. As he explained in a Marvel press release last month, I was invigorated by the opportunity because in addition to my immense respect for Jonathan Hickman's detailed storytelling, the idea of shepherding this bold new take on Black Panther in this event gives me a platform to do the kind of broad, epic storytelling I've always wanted to do in comics. My influences range from the history of Black Panther comics to Ryan Coogler's incredible work with the recent films to Frank Herbert's world-building capacity on Dune. This is something people won't expect, in the best of ways, and full credit to Marvel and editors Will Moss and Michelle Marchese for bringing this creative possibility to me. I've read some series over from Brian Hill in the past. I've really been impressed with what he's lent over to DC Comics in particular. And while I haven't been the biggest fan of his Blade series, I feel like there is so much potential over in this Ultimate Black Panther series. I think one of the most interesting elements of this book that we have so far is the fact that the maker is so heavily attached to what's going on in Ultimate Black Panther. We previewed this series like really extensively in some older streams, and we saw that the maker was like directly featured on the cover. So man, there is so much interesting stuff going on in the Ultimate Marvel universe, not only in terms of like this book, but also in the span of Ultimate X-Men as well. We're going to be looking into all the new Ultimate X-Men stuff in just a few moments. Okay, we have a little bit deeper of an explanation for what was going on in those preview pages. Let's check it out. In the preview pages, we see Ra and Khonshu and their armed forces tear apart a village and claim the land in the name of Moon Knight, while two scouts for Wakanda sit and watch. Their mission is to observe and report back to King T'Challa, but it drives them crazy that they are not allowed to engage with the enemy while they slaughter innocent civilians. We then cut to Wakanda, where we see that T'Challa is married to Okoye, who was previously the head of this universe's Dora Milaje, and is now the Queen of Wakanda. The preview ends with T'Challa looking over his kingdom, knowing that he is going to be forced to use the power of Wakanda to defend the rest of Africa from the villainous Moon Knight. How that goes down exactly, and what role the Maker plays in all this, will be revealed next week. Okay, I am so excited to check out this series now. It really seems like Black Panther is being put in direct opposition to the character of Moon Knight, and the maker is lingering just within the background of this comic book. I think it's going to be so cool to see T'Challa try and defend his land and just go up to battle with one of the most interesting Marvel Universe characters. I like the fact that this is set in kind of alternate reality within the Ultimate Universe, too. I am absolutely on board and we'll be checking out Ultimate Black Panther with a full review very, very soon. Why don't we go ahead and keep the Ultimate storylines going here with Ultimate X-Men? Ultimate X-Men is actually a lot different than Ultimate Black Panther, just in terms of the creative team and some of their influences that they're taking on. So the really acclaimed and just excellent Marvel artist Peach Momoko is not only writing but drawing Ultimate X-Men and brings this really interesting like Eastern and manga sensibility. Plus, Peach Momoko has a really eclectic cast for Ultimate X-Men. We have the new character of May Storm, which appears to be a younger version of Storm, and we also have the character of Hisako Armor as well, who seemingly serves as our protagonist over for this main series. Let's go ahead and explore Marvel Comics' brand new article about Ultimate X-Men published on February 1st. Peach Momoko's Ultimate X-Men 1 trailer presents a vision of mutant kind unlike any other. Ultimate X-Men 1 arrives on March 6th. So we're still a couple weeks away from Ultimate X-Men. I feel like as of right now, this is probably the single most anticipated comic book, at least for me, in terms of Marvel Comics' Ultimate line. I'm glad that it's still a couple weeks away, and we'll be able to get a little bit deeper into Ultimate Spider-Man and get to read the first issue of Black Panther before checking this one out. Nobody except me says, Momoko, find me, I'm sold. I agree, nobody except me. I think we all know that we've been hyping up this book relentlessly for such a long time, and it's only a couple weeks away. Marvel Comics' bold new Ultimate line is in full swing, with readers still buzzing about Jonathan Hickman and Marco Cecchetto's Ultimate Spider-Man 1, and Brian Hill and Stefano Caselli's highly anticipated Ultimate Black Panther 1 hitting stands next week. The excitement increases tenfold in March when renowned writer and artist Peach Momoko brings the children of the Atom in this thrilling new storytelling landscape in Ultimate X-Men 1. Set in Japan, Ultimate X-Men will star Hisako Ichiki, aka Armor, a fan favorite young X-Man who debuted in the groundbreaking Astonishing X-Men. When she discovers her unusual exoskeleton powers, the normal life of the new Ultimate Universe's Armor is shattered as she becomes the first of a new generation of mutants. Witness the X-Men mythology like you've never seen before as Momoko blends the classic mutant metaphor with Japanese folklore and urban legends. The resulting saga infuses horror into the franchise's trademark mutant origin stories as Armor must overcome her darkest fears in order to unlock her full mutant potential. In Peach Momoko's like Demon Days and Demon Wars comic books, we really saw her blend elements of like folklore in terms of like Japanese storytelling with really traditional Marvel Comics elements. To be honest, I think in terms of the writing, some of those aspects could be a little bit more coherent, and I am really, really excited to see Peach Momoko get a second chance at being able to depict a more coherent story over for Ultimate X-Men while utilizing like some of these same influences as well. Behold the magic that awaits in the new Ultimate X-Men 1 trailer featuring never before seen artwork, including a new look at May Storm, the Storm-inspired character whom Momoko created last year for Marvel's New Champions variant cover, who will debut within the series. Yeah, one thing about May Storm too is she's such a brand new character. So in addition to the more established Armor, we also have this really new Marvel character lingering just within the background. So I'm going to go ahead and play this trailer for Ultimate X-Men, but sadly we can never listen to any of the audio from these trailers because I've been copyright claimed by Marvel and by the copyright holder just too many times here. But there is so much cool artwork. Let's go ahead and check this one out. So a lot of times with these like Marvel comic book trailers, I think the way that they animate the panels can be really cheesy, but there's something about the way that Peach Momoko like draws these characters and something about the way that these panels are animated that makes it look a little bit more natural and feel a little bit more realistic to me. I think these Marvel comic book trailers are getting a lot better, and this is one of my favorite that I've seen to date this far. Yeah, super interesting with Hisako kind of finding this really interesting element here with these eyes lurking just beyond the background. Feel like we have a little bit more of a horror influence for Ultimate X-Men, which is even larger than I anticipated. And I wanted to go back just a moment here because I think there's something beautiful about the way that Momoko is introducing these Eastern techniques over to Western comics to just find a much different aesthetic and influence to the series, too. I keep trying to find a good place to pause it. One thing to note here is that this cover is so much different from some of the other art we've seen in terms of Ultimate X-Men. I'm just a little bit, I'm just a little bit mystified in terms of why this looks so much different as opposed to Peach Momoko's main interior work here. I'm also really interested in this mysterious pendant that Hisako has as well within the issue. I really found that the animation over with Hisako fighting the armor behind her is so beautiful in Ultimate X-Men. And we have this new art that Marvel introduced to here for the cover as well. I think this one is absolutely beautiful here. Let's read a little bit more about what Peach Momoko has in store for Ultimate X-Men. At first, I was concerned about being chosen for such an important project, but the more I draw and write the series, the more confident I am with my own vision of Ultimate X-Men, Momoko told AIPT Comics in last week's X-Men Monday column. Ultimate X-Men isn't directly influenced by classic X-Men stories. I like to believe CB Cebulski and Jonathan Hickman chose me because they wanted something completely new and different. Ultimate X-Men is the third launch in Marvel's new Ultimate line that was born out of Hickman and Brian Hitch's Ultimate Invasion series. The saga began with the Maker, one of the final survivors of the doomed Ultimate Universe, traveling back in time on a parallel Earth to create a world without heroes. He's succeeding in preventing various iconic heroes from achieving their destiny and ruled this world in secret throughout various global factions. Now he's vanished and a secret war has broken out across the planet to shape what will happen to his kingdom. Some want to control the world, some want to free it. In Japan, new mutants emerge with no one to teach them. Who will step forward to guide the hated and feared? Filled with modern takes on classic Marvel ideas and characters, the new Ultimate Universe is ripe for rich storytelling and a perfect evolution of the Ultimate brand. See it grow and develop in the upcoming issues of Ultimate Spider-Man, Ultimate Black Panther, and Ultimate X-Men, along with more Marvel Ultimate titles launching in the months ahead, including an all-new Ultimates. So now we have a bigger question in terms of Ultimate X-Men. With Ultimate Black Panther, we know that the Maker is involved in kind of shaping the secret rulers of the world. In Ultimate Spider-Man, I think we've shown that the Maker has taken a direct interest in trying to prevent, Peter Parker's reemergence as Spider-Man. And I think the big question here is, what is the Maker? What does he have to do with the kids in Japan of Ultimate X-Men? So I'm really interested to see how these kind of storylines collide and converge, and how Ultimate X-Men plays into the bigger meta narrative of the Ultimate Universe. Check out the all new Ultimate X-Men issue 1 covers and pre-order this New Mutant milestone at your local comic book shop today. One more time, this issue is coming out over on March 6th. And let me see if we can go ahead and get some of the, let's see here, some of the other covers up on the screen too with Marvel's website. Give me just one moment here. Okay, so here's the cover for the first issue of Ultimate X-Men over from Peach Momoko. One of the things to note here is that Marvel is really moving forward with their trade dress for the Ultimate Comics design. And also the amount of just the way that Marvel kind of shrinks down some of these story elements on this cover too is a little bit interesting. Looks like we have a design sheet over for the character of Hisako Armor coming in directly from Peach Momoko. Just so much expression in terms of some of Hisako's reactions. And I really also like too how her like exoskeleton is reaching for this really interesting pendant here. Also, I have some really interesting sense of fashion here. There's a school design, but also some just really interesting modern clothes over for the character as well. Here's a cover featuring the character of Maystorm over by AKA. So interesting to see this character because she's just so new in terms of the Marvel Universe. I'm also really interested to see if she has any sort of pre-established relationship over with Storm, who we've also seen in the covers of the Ultimate Black Panther comic book. Very interesting cover coming in from Lee In-hyuk, illustrating Armor in a much different context than I think we see from Peach Momoko. I think a lot of the lines on this cover are much more precise and less curvy than what Momoko lends to the page, but I really like seeing other artists' interpretation, especially with artists that are so specialized in the field like Momoko herself. This one is really cool from Betsy Cola, featuring Maystorm giving an expression with her eye that feels so much in line with some of Peach Momoko's other art. Also, once again, just seeing Maystorm so prominently on an epic cover with this blue lightning in the background is so intriguing. Cannot wait to get fully introduced to her in the pages of Ultimate X-Men. AfroSF says, greetings, Arakko Braddock. Ultimate Marvel seems so exciting. I'm definitely getting the whole line. You know what? This is what I want, AfroSF. I want more people to be invested in Marvel Comics. I am so happy that there is so much goodwill now in the Ultimate line. I think Marvel has done a wonderful job launching it. I think like my biggest criticism of the Ultimate line in general is that it just doesn't seem like there's that many people who are aware of it as a whole and who are reading all the books. I almost wish that they would find a way to advertise the Ultimate line to like a more mainstream, group of audience members. A Pilgrim, thanks so much for coming aboard. Good to have you on the stream as well. I want to know from you guys, if anybody's been enjoying these Ultimate comics, let me know over in the background. Metafox, I think Momoko verse is drawing me in. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Metafox, make sure to go ahead and start with the beginning of the Ultimate line. Everything kicked off here over in Ultimate Invasion. That was only a 4-issue series. Then we had the Ultimate Universe one-shot. We had Ultimate Spider-Man. And then we're getting Ultimate Black Panther. So we are really, really new into this like relaunched Ultimate line. Now is the time to get started on these books. Nobody except me says most def. Most def. I agree. I agree. All right. So this is the cover I was talking about before that looks a lot different from the other art. Interestingly enough, though, this cover is also illustrated by Peach Momoko. So it seems like she can adapt a much different style depending on like what she's looking to add to the page. I love that she can dial up the horror, especially it looks like when the scene calls for it. Yeah, this cover has been the background on my phone for several months. Man, this one's so amazing, coming in from Dyke Ruan. really illustrating not only Hisako, not only Maystorm, but Armor's armor within the background too. I just love the use of negative space across this cover, and there's also just a gorgeous black and white one too. Okay, I thought this might be the black and white cover, but it looks like this is an illustration from Mark Brooks. Mark Brooks has been illustrating a lot of these big X-Men covers. His art is so incredibly precise. I feel like you couldn't get any more different than Peach Momoko as opposed to Mark Brooks, particularly in the way that he draws. Armor's armor is just so much different than Momoko does, but I think is still really beautiful to behold. One thing about this cover that's really bothering me is I think it's beautiful, but the actual names of the characters are positioned in like these weird places. And if they were just gone, this cover would be so much better. Let me know if you agree. Let's see here. We have a lot of comments. Let's catch up on what people are saying. Let's see. AfroSF says, I wonder if the villain is Shadow King considering Storm appearance. That would be so much fun. Watching like a psychological battle with Maystorm and Armor against the Shadow King for the opening arc of Ultimate X-Men. Ooh, that would be good stuff, wouldn't it? Metafox says it's so clean. I agree. AfroSF, I prefer indies, but a healthy comic industry needs the big two at the moment. Totally agree. Totally agree. I wish I like indies more, but at this point that I'm just sitting here reading these big two comics. Is Maystorm Asian or white? I am not 100% sure. I don't want to speak out of turn here. I think Maystorm is Japanese. You may be right about that. I mean, they are in a Japanese school together. So I think that actually may be a reasonable conclusion to draw. Okay. So once again, I think Ultimate X-Men, let's confirm here. This one is on sale March 6th. This is probably one of our most anticipated X-Men books. I think the only way we could get like more epic than the reveal of Ultimate X-Men 1 is if Marvel finally revealed the creative team behind the X-Men like from the Ashes reboot. It looks like we have more Ultimate X-Men coverage in store too. I don't know how much in depth we're going to cover this because we've already talked about this cover and a lot of these quotes that are introduced here. Okay, so that's going to wrap up our Ultimate X-Men coverage over for today. And now we're actually going to switch gears over from the main Ultimate X-Men series over to Marvel's traditional 616 continuity. But we're not doing it just in the context of your average everyday X-Men series. We're going to go ahead and explore the brand new Miss Marvel comic book featuring her as an X-Men called Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace. This is a sequel series for Miss Marvel as an X-Men, chronicling her second adventures. I am really hoping there's going to be a strong sense of progression and that she's still going to be battling some of these mutant characters over for Orcus in a really interesting storyline. I think one of the aspects that we're most excited for in terms of Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace, is watching her go up against Mojo, a really interesting X-Men villain who is obsessed with these reality shows. Plus, another really interesting aspect about this book too is that Iman Vellani, the actress of Miss Marvel herself, is writing this series alongside Sabra Perzada. And we also have some illustrations over from Scott Godlewski. Both of these writers were featured on the first series as well. So it's really cool to have everybody back for a sequel series in Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace. I think having Miss Marvel as an X-Men makes her like so much more interesting as a character and opens her up to so many more relationships. Without further ado, let's see what this creative team has in store for Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace. This March, Kamala Khan returns to Jersey City as a fully fledged member of the X-Men in Miss Marvel Mutant Menace. A sequel to last year's acclaimed Miss Marvel, the New Mutant Limited series, Miss Marvel Mutant Menace will once again be written by Marvel Studios' own Miss Marvel, Iman Vellani, and writer Sabra Perzada. Joining them this time will be artist Scott Godlewski, who recently made his Marvel Comics debut in the Fall of X tie-in series Alpha Flight. Just as a quick aside here, I think it's really interesting how Marvel is tapping into kind of a more fresh creative team over for this brand new Miss Marvel series. And while I didn't check out every issue of Alpha Flight, I think a lot of the artwork in that book was pretty fantastic. I'm excited to see what this creative team can bring to the second Miss Marvel comic book series with her as an X-Men. Mutant Menace sees Kamala continue to adjust to her mutant identity as she makes her way back home following her first explosive mission with the X-Men. Discovering she was a mutant during the fall of Krakoa has proven to be quite the challenge, and in order to survive the experience, she'll have to learn how to balance her family and friends with her new X-Men responsibilities, including single-handedly taking down the iconic X-villain Mojo. The highly anticipated debut issue will also sport a stunning variant cover by best-selling artist Derek Chu. The piece shows Kamala rocking her new X costume, ready to protect a world that hates and fears her. Miss Marvel has officially come out to the world as a mutant and a member of the X-Men. She's about to learn just how hard things can get for mutant kind. Kamala Khan is used to being a hometown hero. There's no way her community would turn on her just because she's a mutant, right? Right? So Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace, once again here, is a 4-issue miniseries. We've already covered the creative team. The main cover is illustrated by Carlos Gomez, and the first issue is on sale March 6th. I think in terms of Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace, one of the things I'm really hoping for is that the subject matter is going to get a lot darker, and that this series is going to take even more chances with Kamala as, kind of a leading character, a leading hero. There were a lot of really fun story elements in the first series, and I also like how that comic book was ambitious, but was also really interested in fleshing out these character relationships. And I just think if Sabra Perzada and Iman Vellani continue to write in the same context that they did with their first series, we should be on board for something interesting here. One element about Miss Marvel that has been really interesting me across the X-Men line is just how many books are using her outside of, her main comic book series. She continues to pop up in the main X-Men series, and I think Jerry Duggan really likes using her as a more like point of view character. So for me, it feels like she is just adding so much to the line in general as opposed to taking anything away. I'd be really interested in hearing at this point if anybody is still really negative on Kamala being an X-Men. AfroSF says, please give your opinion as to why you think Kamala Khan being a mutant makes her more interesting. I'm cool with it, by the way. Oh, well, that's a really easy one. I just think it opens her up to more relationships. One of my favorites, pieces of relationships that she has is to the character of Rasputin 4. Rasputin 4 comes from the future, and she was also introduced very early in the span of the X-Men comics, so she already is aware of Kamala Khan, but Kamala Khan doesn't know who she is. So the idea that they're now opening this relationship where Rasputin has just so much more context for, her as a character and as a hero, I think is just such a beautiful plot development. Also, I believe it was like in X-Men 25, it was the issue right after the Hellfire Gala. There was so many fantastic character just reactions and dynamics between Shadowcat as well as Kamala. Kitty right now is really going through it in terms of the Marvel Universe, and just seeing a really bitter Kitty Pryde, who was once the point of view character to Marvel Comics, react to Kamala Khan, I think is another just really fascinating and interesting dynamic. I really encourage you to read Marvel Comics' main X-Men series if you're interested in checking out some of these dynamics. And hey, would you look at that? We have a preview for Marvel's upcoming issue of X-Men featuring Kamala Khan battling alongside the team of mutants with the character known as Nimrod. Let's go ahead and dive into the latest issue of Marvel Comics X-Men series. This one is coming in from Adventures in Poor Taste. The Ultimate Mutant Hunter. The X-Men lived in fear for Nimrod's creation, and now it's clear why. The ultimate weapon of mutant extinction is ever adapting, ever evolving, with only one goal: death to mutant kinds. So X-Men 31 written over by Jerry Duggan, featuring art by Phil Noto, and we have we have a cover from Joshua Cassara and Marte Gracia. So while this first page is illustrated by Phil Noto and actually doesn't feature Miss Marvel, it does do a fantastic job picking up on the cliffhanger from the previous issue of X-Men, where the character of Talon was unable to escape from the High Evolutionaries base with her life intact and had to be absorbed, over into Sync's head. So just a really interesting way to conceptualize this really harrowing story dynamic. And I think Jerry Duggan just does a really, really wonderful job picking up on this cliffhanger with Talon trapped in Sync's head over in the issue. And then on this next page, we're really getting caught up to speed with Nightcrawler as well as Kitty as they try and determine what's wrong with Sync. And in addition to Talon being stuck in Sync's head, Sync also is dealing with high blood pressure as well as just general sickness here. And this storyline kind of gives way over to Spider-Man and Miss Marvel talking about the character of Sync and really appreciating the fact that the High Evolutionary had technology that can stop the kill switch over within the Orchis drugs. As you can see here, this storyline with Kamala Khan being cemented in terms of the X-Men has given her like a direct reason to interact with a character like Spider-Man and be featured in an X-Men series that's so important to Marvel's current publishing line. Also, I think Phil Noto is just a wonderful artist to illustrate characters like Spider-Man and Miss Marvel as characters. He's really great at introducing these strong expressions. Over on this page, we have Miss Marvel and Spider-Man once again talking about diffusing some of those Orchis kill switches in the Krakoan drugs when Nimrod finds the characters and says, "I bet you thought Orchis wouldn't notice you until I was too late, but you'd have been wrong." Then we have Miss Marvel saying to Spider-Man, "Nimrod's onto us," with Peter Parker acknowledging, "Yep, I jinxed it." All right, so I am really excited about Marvel Comics X-Men series. I think the role that Kamala Khan plays in this comic book is so interesting. I'm also really mystified by this cliffhanger over with Sync and Talon. I hope we find some way for Talon to return to her corporeal form, for lack of a better word. And once again, I just hope there's a really fantastic and strong way to wrap up, this really late stage Krakoan era X-Men title. Also, I'm excited to see some of our heroes maybe get a rematch against Nimrod, who bested so many X-Men during the publisher's Hellfire Gala. Okay, why don't we head back over to the character of Miss Marvel? It looks like we have some more preview pages for this upcoming series too. All right, so this is a brand new preview over for Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace, coming in from Marvel.com. Miss Marvel has returned to Jersey City, but her relationship with her hometown may never be the same. During Fall of X, Kamala Khan revealed herself to the world as a mutant hero. Now, in Miss Marvel Mutant Menace by Villani Perzada and Scott Godlewski, she will start to realize what she means to her community, and she might not like what she sees. After years of protecting Jersey City as its hometown hero, Miss Marvel will have to learn how to navigate her mutant identity as a member of the X-Men under the scrutiny of her beloved hometown. A special first look at Miss Marvel Mutant Menace 1 shows Kamala standing strong on the streets of Jersey City while smoke pours out of her embiggened hands. In one page, she looks disheartened in a large puffy jacket that hides her X-Men uniform, while the citizens of Jersey City debate her intentions and form a mutant watch group. In another page, Kamala joins the X-Men underground, where Wolverine whips up breakfast for herself, Deadpool, Rogue, Psylocke, and Monet, only for Psylocke to point out that Kamala has been logged on a Mutant Watch website. Then Kamala serves food alongside her family at a community dinner. Finally, she faces off against Horticulture, a group of bioterrorists who have a fraught history with mutant kind. So one of the big aspects in terms of the Fall of X narrative for the X-Men is the fact that Orchis really sowed so much distrust over in Marvel's X-Men between just the regular people of Earth. And I think Miss Marvel is really feeling that now in the context of this latent Mutant Menace series with so many characters forming this mutant watch and trying to really track down her location. I think this page from Scott Godlewski is wonderful. It's just the definition of a gorgeous bleed. There's about 5 different panels that Miss Marvel is walking in front of, just bleeding in front of behind her. And the fact that there's some negative space giving way to the logo is amazing. I am so impressed by just this one interior page alone here from Scott Godlewski. All right, let's see if I can pull up more of the interior art. Give me one moment here. So here's another interior page coming in from Scott Godlewski. Let's see. Give me one moment. Okay, perfect. So for now, I think this will work just fine. I think these images are a little bit low res, but you can clearly make out what's going on in the background. So we have an opening page introducing Miss Marvel as an X-Men once again here. We can see the kind of smoke coming out of her hands within the page, which are embiggened too. And then we also have the page that we looked at earlier from Scott Godlewski with so many fascinating bleeds here, where Miss Marvel is kind of going undercover, trying to keep a low profile with this mutant watch group joining up in the background here. Okay, and this is what the preview was teasing, with Wolverine cooking up breakfast for some of the rest of the X-Men crew. This is a little bit different of a team than our usual underground X-Men characters. We have Rogue, Deadpool, I see Monet, there's Psylocke, Quanon in the background. I would say characters like Psylocke and Deadpool we don't usually see. This kind of looks more like the Uncanny Avengers characters at Marvel Comics. And then we also have Miss Marvel kind of serving her community as well. I think this preview does a wonderful job showing just how many different relationships Kamala is able to carry in the Marvel Universe in terms of her life as an X-Men as well as her personal life, which has also been one of the greatest aspects of this new generation of Miss Marvel comics. Okay, here we have Miss Marvel going up against the characters from Horticulture who were featured like so early within the scope of Jonathan Hickman's X-Men run. It's kind of fun to see them introduced within the context of this series. I'm wondering if like Mojo has any tie-ins maybe to these Horticulture characters or just where he comes from within the scope of this book. Also, once again, lots of different facial expressions, lots of different interpretations of the page here from Godlewski. I really am appreciating his art. I do think that he could probably really render a more solid line and give a little bit more detail in terms of the backgrounds here. But I am just really appreciating what is present and also that sense of perspective that changes across some of these panels. The way that Godlewski has the panel positioned here is really, really nice with this arch, really kind of framing some of the negative space within the panel on the page. So really cool stuff over for Miss Marvel, the Mutant Menace. I am so excited to check out what Iman Vellani, Saber Perzada, and Scott Godlewski have in store for this book. I think their first miniseries was nothing short of tremendous. And I think the future is finally looking bright for Miss Marvel. I think there were so many years after her introduction where I really was so bored at everything going on in her main book. And now I'm a lot more interested to read each and every issue of the series. This is going to be a super, super fun story. It's really going to be more centered around art appreciation, but we have some wonderful covers for various Marvel Comics women over from the Stormbreakers, the up-and-coming artists from Marvel Comics. I'm going to see if we can get these up on the screen. Okay. So this first cover is really, really cool. This is a cover for Captain America, but it actually features the unbeatable Squirrel Girl. So one of the aspects about this cover that has me just really excited to check it out, frankly, is that it's illustrated by Lucas Werneck. Lucas Werneck has illustrated just so many wonderful issues of Immortal X-Men and is also currently the artist on Follow the House of X. Seeing him draw just the really affable and jovial Squirrel Girl is really, really fun over in the context of Marvel. Especially love this smile that he's able to illustrate over on her squirrel. Okay, here we have an Avengers issue 11 Stormbreaker variant coming in from Martin Coccolo with the character from Wakanda. Her name is blanking on me right now, but really, really beautiful cover from Coccolo, the artist over on Marvel's current Thor series. Really great sense of perspective, too. And I think there's just a really nice place for the logo to go at the top of the page. Okay, here we have let's see, a Spider-Gwen variant coming in from Jan Bazaldua. Really appreciated some of Jan Bazaldua's work in the past at Marvel. Not sure what comics Bazaldua has been working on lately. But once again, a really strong sense of perspective and a great way to illustrate, I think, one of the heroines of the Marvel Universe here. We have a cover from Elena Casagrande featuring like the Western aesthetic for the Guardians of the Galaxy in the Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing run. While I'm not the biggest fan of Gamora's new costume, I think this is interpreted incredibly well from Casagrande as an artist. I think Casagrande is just so tremendous. I really only became aware of Casagrande's work within the last couple months, but each and every time I see a cover, I'm just blown away here. Let's see, Chris Allen. Chris Allen has been delivering work on Marvel's main Black Panther series. The amount of lines and texture that he lends to the page is incredible. This is another artist where every time I see his art, I'm absolutely blown away. Just the amount of detail in Riri Williams' Ironheart design here is amazing. The amount of lines and technology really make this look like the next generation, the kind of future of the Marvel Universe. Federico Vicentini on Miss Marvel, The Mutant Menace, issue 1 Stormbreaker variant. I really like the way that Vicentini is able to render motion, but I'm just not the biggest fan of how he's able to characterize and really illustrate just so many rounded lines. I wish some of his lines were a little bit more precise and that some of his artwork was just a little bit easier to interpret. But I still think that this cover is really, really ambitious and framed in a way that you don't usually see Miss Marvel covers. And we have Nick Klein over on She-Hulk. Nick Klein, I think, has just been absolutely tearing it up over on Marvel's main Hulk series. Watching Nick Klein illustrate She-Hulk is so fascinating and just a great way to see his art and just a little bit of a different, hue here. I've also loved some of the work that he's illustrated over on Thor. This context, the way that She-Hulk is positioned on the page, just breaking out of this massive wall is really, really amazing. Really fantastic stuff coming in from Nick Klein. So that was a brief look over at Marvel's heroine variant covers from the Stormbreakers in the Marvel Universe. So excited to check out some of these upcoming books. Okay, so we're actually going to go ahead and detail the latest chapter of X-Men Monday. This one is really going to detail some of the upcoming fallout over for the recent Resurrection of Magneto series from Marvel. Resurrection of Magneto came out last week, and this week we saw the release of Dead X-Men. But there were just so many interesting plot threads with Magneto being reintroduced to Storm and Storm going on this massive quest to see if she can save one of like the founding members of the Krakoan Age of X-Men. I'm really thinking that Storm is going to need to recruit Magneto in order to fight their massive war against Orchis to exact some of their vengeance here. Let's go ahead and explore what Al Ewing has in store for the rest of Resurrection of Magneto in X-Men Monday. This one is written by Chris Hassan on Adventures in Poor Taste. Welcome, X fans, to another uncanny edition of X-Men Monday at AIPT. The beginning of the end of the Krakoan era has kept us very busy this January. We broke down Fall of the House of X, then we discussed Rise of the Powers of 10. Now it's time to break down Resurrection of Magneto. So let's see what Al has to say. Welcome back to X-Men Monday, Al. Let's kick things off with a question from X-fan Sam, who's writing in for the first time because you're one of his favorite comic writers. Sam wanted to know what inspired the inspiration between the romance with Storm and Craig. Yeah, so Storm and Craig Marshall are a very new item over at Marvel Comics. Kind of cool to see them in the context of a relationship. We really saw Craig get more invested in Aurora and Storm as a character within X-Men Red. Opening Resurrection of Magneto with Craig and Storm was just a really interesting way to see how their relationship developed, when they were off the page. So Al Ewing says about the relationship between Craig and Storm, I'd introduce Craig as a human voice on Arakko because I thought it was important that Arakko was a more complex race than people expected. At the same time, two things occurred to me. First, I missed the days when superheroes had more relationships with non-super supporting cast members. These days, superheroes tend to date each other, which is very efficient. It's two heroes getting romance beats for the price of one. Very useful space-wise, especially how comic storytelling is decompressed over the past 30 years. But at the same time, it makes the superhero world feel a little closed off and incestuous. And it also means heroes are never really off the clock. Now, even love is work-related. This is a really great just thought experiment for Al Ewing and just an interesting way to flesh out Storm as a character, a little bit different from some of her peers and contemporaries. Craig has been a really interesting character that's been able to support the X-Men during their battle with the Genesis, the former wife of Apocalypse during the Genesis War. So the idea of seeing him kind of get rewarded with a relationship with Storm is just really, really beautiful. Craig has been in the background of this book for a long time now. I remember really taking note of his character in X-Men Red, specifically after Sins of Sinister wrapped up. The second thing that Storm needed was to relax a bit, and I thought a fun thing to do would be to have her go on a date. Maybe mirroring the dinner with Doom scene from Sword. Oh my god, that was such a long time ago. Does anybody remember the dinner with Doom scene over in Sword? That was a really cool moment there. Kind of showing how that'd go if she actually wanted to be there. And hey, there's this eligible bachelor in her orbit. At a certain point, all this is like snooker or cooking. You've set the balls in motion, and when they just naturally bang into each other and careen off the table, and you see what ends up there and then work from that. You have a recipe in your head, but at the same time, you suddenly decide to add a bit more spice, and so on. A Pilgrim says, I've also been saying that about normal people and superheroes not interacting anymore. AIPT says, now, well, I'm hungry. Another Storm relationship question. X-Fan Dear God loves your work and noticed some nods to Storm's times with Yukio throughout the issue. How would you define their relationship? Al Ewing says, I mean, it's all there in Claremont. It's right on the page. Yukio appealed to a part of Storm she hadn't, until that point, allowed herself or been allowed by others to fully express. She associates those rooftop feelings with freedom. Freedom from expectations, freedom from her own self-imposed restrictions. Yukio will always be that person who opened the door, who showed her another way to be. So comparing what she's got with Craig to that other great relationship is both a big compliment to him and also a signifier of sorts, that she's letting herself go again. That this particular person who gives her the freedom to just be. But Yukio is also relevant to the story because of her relationship with death. To that leap into the unknown that she chooses over a path that's safer and less true to her spirit. So though Storm starts in that safe zone with Craig, she has to leave that place of safety or represents to follow Yukio's example. She's got to be true to who she is. I'm breaking it down a little bit more than I did when I wrote it, explaining a gut decision with the head. but it makes a nice little buried nugget for old heads to put together. X-fan Richard Chatham was curious to know how long Enigma, the crown above all things, inclusion in the Krakoa era has been in the works. Kieran Gillen recently spoke about this in X-Men Monday, saying, I don't want to share specifics about Alan Javier's second masterwork. That's for them to share, so it's only fair you get a chance to give your side. We're going to give a little bit more context on this in just a moment. So Enigma, the crown above all things, I thought was introduced over in the final issue of Immortal X-Men, but as it turns out, there was a different comic book that first introduced Enigma, and that was none other than Al Ewing's Defender series with Javier Rodriguez. So the fact that we were introduced to this really core piece of X-Men continuity in the scope of another book that we didn't know was like important to the Marvel Universe at all is just really mystifying. I'm really interested to hear how Al Ewing talks about the creation of Enigma, the crown above all things. Here's the timeline from my point of view as I remembered it. Defenders Beyond was roughly plotted out, and the idea was that it'd be a journey for knowledge. And though the real lesson Adam comes to understand is that the journey from knowledge is infinite and never ending. I wanted to have a real nugget of future knowledge of a real upcoming threat as something as satisfying for the reader. Now, I had plans at the time for two things this could be. Something for a third Defender series. Having been renewed once, we thought we'd push for a second comeback. And if we didn't get that, I had a big villain for, a redacted pitch that fell through. Man, hearing that Al Ewing potentially had a third Defender series that we never read is like heartbreaking. Defenders and Defenders Beyond were both absolutely tremendous way back when. I think we actually covered the first issue of Defenders Beyond as well. Oh, yeah. This page from Resurrection of Magneto, I think I also made reference in our video review for Resurrection of Magneto 2 for how this one talks about Defenders Beyond with the character of the Beyonder featured prominently on the page, as well as Enigma 2. So it's just amazing when you look at all the plot threads just dangling between some of these X-Men books. If both of those fell through, well, I'm also in the X office, and I know that there's a big cosmic threat from outside space and time that Kieran's putting together. And that's going to be a big climactic thing that'll shake up at least the X-Men books and hopefully the entire 616. So if Defenders Beyond ends up foreshadowing that, it's not shortchanging the reader at the end. I was talking to Kieran a lot anyway to make sure we were both using the white hot room in non-contradictory ways. I am so glad to hear that Kieran Gillen and Al Ewing are in like constant communication with each other. You know, some of their X-Men books overlap in terms of plot threads, so just being sure that like everybody is on the same page is like required. Around the same time, I asked if it'd be okay to drop some hints at Enigma and worked out a bunch of stuff with the 5th Tarot suit, the 5th business from Robert Davies' Deptford trilogy, and so on. Man, I am really hoping that we get some realization of this third Defenders series eventually. If you haven't checked out Al Ewing's Defenders, go read it. It's fantastic. X-Fan Avery said that when you introduced Tarn in the story, he seemed to be extremely powerful and determined to return to life, even with Krakoan resurrection out of the question. Would it still be possible for a mutant as powerful as Tarn to bring himself back from the dead? Yeah, Tarn is such a POS in the Marvel Universe. Let's be real. Bringing him back for Resurrection of Magneto when he made such a big splash in Sword and X-Men Red was just an absolute joy. Let's see what Ewing has to say about Tarn the Uncaring. Yeah, I've hinted in one or two places that's his plan. He's just too good a villain to leave dead forever. Indeed. And he surely doesn't feel beholden to custom. Imagine him bursting out of a toxic egg. What a great visual. So if I'd had a little more room, I'd definitely have brought in the Spire Vial and brought him back to life. But I'm happy leaving that as a landmine for future writers to detonate if they want to. Okay, this is really making me sad now because it really sounds like Al Ewing is leaving just the X-Men suite of comics.
His time at the publisher has just been tremendous. He's really added so much towards the Krakoan era. I am devastated to see that it looks like he's leaving based on how he's talking about these books. I think we also got a reference too to hear that Kieran Gillen was leaving the X books. I am also absolutely devastated. I'm really hoping that not every single writer and artist from all these X-Men titles is going to be on a different book. I'm really hoping in particular that Cy Spurrier is going to stick along in the next launch of books in particular. Afro Asef, who is the Beyonder in Al Ewing's Defenders? Afro Asef, it was the Beyonder, I believe, from Secret Wars 2. Just straight up, it was that same character. Once again, great book. You got to go ahead and check it out. Real quick here, I also want to mention Al Ewing has been doing so much stuff with the Spire Vial. Man, I wish X-Men Red was longer so we got to realize a little bit more of his full vision. But I think each and every issue that we got of that series was absolutely wonderful and tremendous. X-Men fan Aurora's Wind would like to congratulate you on a monumental first issue and thank you for this fantastic ride for Storm. What was the thought process behind wanting to include Ashiki in this story? Can we look forward to this side of Aurora's character being explored in a bit of a further in the miniseries, or was that all there was the space for? This whole journey is very magical and metaphorical, and Storm gets another point of view issue in 3. The even numbers belong to Magneto, so we can expect a bit more. Ashaki's kind of done her bit at this point. I included her because I did some research for a bit that's coming up and found that many from a while back that featured her very heavily while exploring Aurora's magical side, which led me down a quick research rabbit hole into her whole deal. She's sort of up to something in her first appearance in New Mutants, and we never really find out what. I like the idea that she's doing all this stuff in her time period and that she's reaching all the way forward to now. And maybe one day we'll find out what that is, and maybe we won't. Anyway, Ashaki seemed like a useful ingredient. It always makes me impressed hearing the fact that these writers go back and find like these off the beaten path miniseries, pluck these characters, and then reintroduce them in some of their main books. I think that is a wonderful way to write comics and to respect the context of a shared universe. This issue features a terrific splash page that highlights Storm and Magneto's long history. X-fan Munchkin Marauder wanted to know, what about the Storm and Magneto dynamic you enjoy writing about? Afro SF, I just ordered the Secret Wars 2 reprint paperback. I guess I should check out Defenders. Yeah, you got to check out that book. It is nuts. It is amazing. And also, too, the way like the sequel series to Defenders Beyond, the way it sets up Enigma for this X-Men stuff. Ooh, so good, so good. All right, so what about Storm and Magneto's relationship does Al Ewing enjoy writing? It's honestly quite vibes-based at this point. I do have this kind of tendency to use the metatext of these characters that's built up over 60 years as a kind of subtext of their fictional lives. And there's something in the way that they both evolved from their initial characterizations to become something more complex and multifaceted at roughly the same time. Under the same writer, maybe more than any other X character barring Wolverine, who Storm has a hard to define relationship with, but that's a whole other topic. Yeah, at one point Storm and Wolverine were dating, at one point they weren't. That was a weird time at Marvel. Yeah, this page was really, really amazing from artist Luciano Vecchio. Can't believe we've talked about Resurrection Magneto this much and haven't said Vecchio's name once. The art in this book was tremendous. The layouts are amazing. There's so much ambition in the artwork from the interiors matching just the amazing material that Al Ewing brings to the book. The Magneto and Storm of the mid-70s are not the Storm and Magneto of the late 80s, which was when my formative X memories were. Both characters are moving towards each other, and they're getting a rep for cold, practical decisions and maybe look a bit villainy from the outside. Storm by hardening her look, and Magneto by softening his. So there was a brief moment where these two characters made the connection and attempted this difficult project that fell through, but maybe could have worked. And that's a really hard connection to describe, but it's one that remains. I haven't finished Chris Claremont's X-Men run in full. I don't know if I understand the full scope of what Al Ewing says, but I'm glad to hear that he has so much context for this relationship and is able to represent that on the page as well. Aurora's Fire has less of a question and more of a moment of appreciation for many, including myself. You've set a new bar when it comes to writing Aurora. The respect and detail and intentionality in every word is much appreciated, and what a character of her stature and history deserves. And I hope we'll see more in the future, but if not, what I'd like to share in response or say anything about writing Storm these past few years. Goodness, Al Ewing has really done so much tremendous character work for Storm and X-Men Red. Storm really featured as like the protagonist of that book, and everything else was kind of centered around her. I think I really became a lot more invested in the Krakoan era when X-Men Red was born anew and when Storm became the voice of Soul. I think some of those first issues, like watching her navigate the incredibly tense political landscape over on Arakko, was really, really amazing. There was just so much tension in some of those opening issues, and watching how it all wrapped up with Genesis was really, really breathtaking. Al Ewing says, "I'm very happy when my work goes down well, and I very much appreciate the kind words." X-Fan Grace said, "Resurrection of Magneto is the greatest comic he's ever read. Were you as blown away by Luciano Vecchio's art as the rest of us?" Definitely want to hear Al Ewing's commentary on what his collaborator Luciano Vecchio brought to the page. Luciano deserves all the praise for this. He was absolutely picking up everything I was trying to clumsily lay down. He grokked the Tarot stuff right from the start, and every page he's delivered has been absolutely phenomenal. I can't thank him enough, and I really hope this brings more eyes on him as one of the great artistic talents of the current era in comics. I really think that mirrors our sentiments about Vecchio. Vecchio, really, really wonderful artist. I think just has like a more curvy, a more expressionistic line than what you see in terms of Marvel's regular house style. I would love to just see any comic books Vecchio is able to illustrate in the future, and I hope some of them are from Marvel's upcoming X-Men line. A throwback question before we wrap it up. X-Fan Kingdom X asked if there were any storylines or characters from Sword that you wish you got to spend more time with. Oh God, this is so heartbreaking. Oh God, I don't think the full potential of Sword was realized in the scope of that book alone. And I don't think the full potential of X-Men Red was realized either. I think these are books that both could have gone like multiple additional years. I loved like every single storyline in all these comic books. I am devastated that Al Ewing is leaving the X-Men franchise, but I'm sure I'll love whatever Al Ewing writes next at Marvel. Oh my goodness. Al Ewing directly points out WizKid. WizKid was such a good character. It was a character who seemingly meshed so well with Al Ewing's writing sensibilities. There were so many great lines with him, especially in some of those early issues of Sword. Frenzy. I am not as familiar with Frenzy as I wish I was, frankly, but she did have some cool cameos in the most recent issue of Dead X-Men. Oh, and that's sad too. Al Ewing is also saying he wished he got to plot out more in terms of this giant chart that he was working with and really flesh out some additional storylines. This is going to make me cry if we keep reading this. Okay. I'd love to spend more time with WizKid and Frenzy with all the different divisions, do more with that giant org chart, those amazing uniforms Valerio Schiti designed. Oh God, this is so sad. This is so sad. The truth is that I really miss Valerio and Marte. We were a good team. I just wish we'd had oh man. Oh man, and now he's directly bemoaning some of the tie-ins and talking about how he didn't inject enough of his original pitch ideas in terms of the Sword book. Oh, this is devastating. Finally, what can you tease about the next issue of Resurrection of Magneto? Al Ewing says it's from Magneto's point of view, and it's called The Weight of the World. It's about the weight of the world on him, the weight of the world upon the world, whether he can or should be bear either of those things again. Oh, and there's a cool key we haven't seen for a while. I think I know what he's trying to say. So when Al Ewing died, or excuse me, when Magneto died in the pages of X-Men Red, he seemingly lost his will to live long before that. So it seems like maybe in Resurrection of Magneto issue 2, we're going to see the reason for why Magneto wants to come back to life in general. It's escaping me on where we last saw this key, but my God, this panel bleed, the negative space, and just the way that Vecchio is able to draw this figure on the page is amazing. Hype has never been higher, but on that note, thanks for stopping by X-Men Monday. And remember, Resurrection of Magneto 2 goes on sale February 28th. For something a little bit more immediate, how about a few exclusive preview images courtesy of X-Men senior editor Jordan D. White? So another aspect of Resurrection of Magneto 2 that's going to be really, really cool is actually finally getting Max's perspective. Magneto, I think right now is one of the most interesting characters at Marvel. Once again, really seeing why he's trying to come to grips back on his life too, I think is going to be really, really interesting. I'm thinking that this is a panel from Rise of the Powers of 10, issue 2. We have this plot thread lingering with Xavier in the background of that book. Really wonderful art coming in from R.B. Silva. A Pilgrim, I think the key was in one of the giant size issues. Thank you for letting me know about that. I'll see if I can scope it out there with Namor. Okay, really appreciate that reference there. I'll see if I can track that down. Okay, here's Polaris. So this is probably a page from Lucas Wernick from Fall of the House of X. This is really nice. Loving this super aggressive costume Magneto expired for Polaris. What do we have here? This one is hard for me to trace. I'm almost thinking it maybe potentially could be some dead X-Men stuff. Also, I'm not sure where this panel is coming from either, but really like the expression here. It's got to be a Luciano Vecchio illustrated Storm for Resurrection of Magneto. So many lines, so much detail on this close-up panel here. Until next time, X-fans, stay exceptional. All right, so I think today that is going to go ahead and wrap it up for our stream. I want to thank everybody for stopping by today. I think we had just a freaking blast here checking out what's next in store for like Ultimate X-Men, for Ultimate Black Panther, and just all that stuff in general. We will be back tomorrow. I'm going to be honest, we're going to do a bit of a shorter stream tomorrow, but we'll still talk about some more exciting news stories that we didn't get a chance to discuss today. Really hope you enjoyed the stream. And we'll be back really soon to see what's next in Marvel and DC Comics. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We'll see you tomorrow.